I'm alive.
Venom. Venom! Venom! Hey, been a while. When I think of Venom, I think of one scene, and we're not gonna get into that. Scooby-Doo 2 is never gonna be the same. Today we're gonna be talking about a movie that, from what I can tell, has done three things really well. Gotten a highly unfair amount of hate from the wider-reaching film community, despite the previous, still stayed relevant enough somehow that I'm talking about it today, and revealed to me a kink that I didn't know that I had. Venom is in an interesting and sort of unique position, in my opinion. I say this because it's both hated by film snobs and comic book nerds alike, but it still has a sect of close fans, to this day even. I mean, even just doom scrolling through my Twitter feed, I see people still talking about the first film, let alone the one that just came out, to this day. And while personally I think the sequel only really deserves to exist because of the post-credit scene, more on that later, that's more than you can say for a lot of films, especially superhero ones. Catwoman, Daredevil, the movie, not the Netflix show. Any superhero shit conjured up by the CW. More recently, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, Thor and Thor: A Dark World, Iron Man 2 and 3, Captain Marvel, WandaVision, cry about it, Wet Thor, like Birds of Prey, Batman v Superman, either of the Suicide Squad movies, the Justice League, on and on and on and on I can go about superhero films that I just don't like, that are fairly forgettable or just not worth rewatching, period. But because of some Sony magic or maybe a blood sacrifice here and there, I really like the first Venom film, even though it's not a good movie. I've seen it like 3 times, yet despite my enjoyment of the first film, I never actually sat down and tried to figure out why I like it, or more accurately, why I don't like the second one. A part of this does stem from a belief of mine that while deconstructing a movie and figuring out what does and doesn't work with it can be pretty enjoyable, I think that there are many a movie where that's just not appropriate. And in my opinion, Venom is a movie like that, where it's best enjoyed with little to no mental work involved. It's best appreciated if you just turn off your brain and go with the motions. It's a no-nonsense think-thunker of kind of a movie. But even still, I made the executive decision to do just that. And as such, I will watch these movies, come back to you when they're fresh in my mind, and we'll continue from there.
Jeffrey Bezos.
Okie dokie. It's a new day, I'm in new clothes, and I have the movies in my head. Let's get into it. I'd like to make something perfectly clear right off the bat. I don't hate superhero movies. There's actually a lot of them that I really do like. There are just some specific problems that I have with specific movies that I showed in this video. I do at times think they're pretty formulaic and nearly done to death, but I don't hate them. All of this said though, I think Venom is doing things a bit differently, which is why it's worth talking about. I'd like to open your heart, mind, and soul to just how horrible this movie is in the best possible way. Let me explain. Venom came out in 2018. 2018? Really? It's been that long? Existential crises aside, 2018 was a really wonky year for superhero films. From Black Panther to Wet Thor, nobody really seemed to know what they were doing. Luckily, we were blessed with Spider-Verse, which is in my opinion one of the best superhero films ever made, and definitely the best Spider-Man. And yes, for the record, I am losing it over the sequel. We got Black Panther in 2018, which didn't age well. As for movies I enjoyed, we had Deadpool 2, and that's the end of that sentence. We were also gifted Wet Thor. So all around 2018 was a pretty mixed bag for superhero films. And wedged somewhere in between Deadpool 2 and one of Black Panther's Oscar nominations was Venom, which while being a fundamentally flawed movie with a fundamentally flawed main character, I always really got a kick out of. So for those of you who don't know, Venom stars Tom Hardy playing Eddie Brock, or as I like to call him, Ed Hardy. You know, like the cologne. I thought it was funny. Anyways, the movie opens up on Ed Hardy, the sexy man, news reporter in some place in California. I think San Francisco, I'm not sure. And he's got it made, you know? He's got a good girlfriend, a good job as a reporter, got a really nice place to live in, he drives a motorcycle, everybody knows who he is. He's got things going really well for him. That is until, you know, he doesn't. The TLDR in this film is there's an evil scientist, and he's got a bunch of aliens. While breaking into the top secret facility with the alien, Ed Hardy gets the alien inside him, and wacky hijinks ensue. You see, I've abridged the synopsis in an effort to get across to you how simple a premise this film is. Yet despite similarities you might be able to draw from, let's say, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 1, this movie is well, it's different. And I think a big part of that is how Eddie Brock is written as a character. Now, I did make the distinction between Eddie Brock and Tom Hardy on purpose, because I don't think that it was the fault of Tom Hardy that his character was written so poorly. In fact, I don't really think they could have found anybody better for the role, in spite of, like, John Cena. Could you imagine? I just sincerely think he was written in such a broken way that many people in the film industry have a hard time wrapping their square brains around how he could even exist, let alone end up in the highly successful situation that he finds himself in at the beginning of this movie. But whether it's through the edginess of Venom as a character or the well-acted and well-sold characteristics of Ed Hardy, for whatever reason, this movie stuck in my head. And as much as I hate to admit it, as a 16-year-old, I really liked that turd in the wind scene at the very end of the movie. I memorized it, actually, and referenced it quite often with my friend Jacob. I unironically thought that this was a good movie when I was a kid. And I think a big part of the reason that I liked this movie so much as a kid is Eddie. Eddie sucks. He's a bad person. He does stupid shit, and he pays for that. He's a loser. He's an idiot. He makes some stupid, dumb boy decisions, and as a 16-year-old, I could really relate to that. This is to say that stupid, jaded teenage idiots like I used to be could really identify with Eddie Brock in a way that we really couldn't with Peter Parker. So, I mean, if there's a reason that I liked the first Venom movie so much, I'd have to say that it was because I could identify with it on a pretty deep level as a kid. So that's the first movie. I would move straight on to the second movie because that is such a shit show, and I really want to get into it. But we'll get more into that at a different time. This video has already been long enough, so yeah, I haven't uploaded in ages, so I couldn't really recommend you any of my older videos. They're going to be a pretty big drop in quality if you were to go back and watch them. But even still, go ahead and watch my other videos if you want. But if you don't, guys, remember, no one cares.